I'm with you today to talk about Reiki as a self-development path. I have been with Reiki, I guess, about 18 years now myself. And what I wanted to do to begin was just to ask you to reflect on your own journey with Reiki. Some of you will have been working with Reiki far longer than I have. Some, it may be a really recent experience. But what I would love for you to start with is just to reflect on your journey. So, how were you in your life when you first found Reiki or Reiki first found you? You know, how were you? How were you feeling? And then now, what have you learned? What's changed over that time? And I'm just going to give you a minute or so, and also that allows anybody who's still coming back from the break to join us. So just take a minute to reflect. How was I when I first discovered Reiki? How am I now? How is life? And anybody who wants to put their reflections into the chat box, you're really so welcome to do that. For me, in my first 5 years of teaching Reiki at Shoden and Okuden levels, so at level 1 and 2, the single most frequent expression I would get from other people of what changed as a result of learning Reiki was they described a sense of positivity that they really hadn't had access to before. I remember so clearly one of my early students saying to me, I used to be the most negative person in the world, and now I'm just so positive. My family barely recognise me, and people at work barely recognise me, and it feels so good. Other people used to talk about experiencing a growing trust in life, a sense of things would work out that maybe they hadn't had before, an optimism maybe that they hadn't had before. Certainly, people talked about greater resourcefulness. And for me, I think what it felt like for me was just somebody turned the magic on. So I find life began to attain more colour. And I certainly enjoyed my life more. I really took more moment by moment. And I also found so much pleasure and learning in sharing Reiki with other people. And really, I guess I would say I felt like I'd found my tribe and I'd found a way to serve them. So I was a very, very happy early Reiki practitioner. And you know, really just in an ongoing state of delight. And then when I came to the point where the first people asked me if I was teaching at Reiki Master level, and I wasn't yet, I decided it was really time to immerse myself in Reiki as if I was a beginner and see what I discovered this second time round. And so I guess that's about 10 years ago now. And it was then that I really committed to the Reiki Evolution, the original Japanese way. And as I went through the manuals and I really checked in with myself, do I absolutely understand this in a way that I could teach it to somebody else for them to teach it onwards? It felt such a responsibility. And it was then that I reconnected, or really connected, I would say probably for the first time, with the sense that it was a path to self-development, it was a path to enlightenment. I think I'd been so much in the joy and the bliss of the experience that I'd never really thought about how it could develop me as a person in my life going forwards, that it could lead me towards my own satori, my own sudden moments of enlightenment, perhaps, my own nirvana, or in the words that I was originally taught, coming from the yoga community, my own experience of samadhi. That state of consciousness in which we intuitively know and experience oneness with everything. And as an aside, do you know the best description I've ever come across, most compelling I've ever come across of that oneness is actually from a neuroanatomist who had a stroke and observed the process of having a stroke and then how her mind worked afterwards. Her name is Jill Bolte Taylor, and you can find My Stroke of Insight both as a YouTube talk or a TED talk or her book, My Stroke of Insight. It is the most exquisite description of how, in losing total left brain function, she experienced what our right brain wants to do all the time, which is just to exist in the experience of oneness. She describes there's no end between my being and the shower screen and the air beyond it and the wall here, which did make it very difficult to navigate life. And she had to go through a process of relearning everything, relearning to walk, relearning to speak, relearning absolutely everything. But the description of the ocean of oneness that she merged into is exquisitely beautiful. Highly recommended. That's what I experienced as a child when I was taught to meditate at age 9. That oneness is what I was experiencing when really immersed in a treatment or training. And really, that's why there was so much joy, so much bliss available. It's the same oneness that we really do rely on when we're sending Reiki over time, over distance to support ourselves or to support others. And I understood in that second immersion that I had already tasted oneness numerous times, and that through Reiki as a system, I could set steps in place for other people to experience it too, but in a very practical, grounded way. A way that could fill other people with joy, a way that could create this optimism, this positivity, and a sense of empowerment. But I want to really focus on the practicality, actually, because I was already a yoga teacher and a meditation teacher. So I already had a way of working that is also grounded. It's grounded in your body. But that wasn't how I'd originally experienced I guess, even the desire, the possibility of enlightenment. I had experienced it as very much at school in a way that one transcends one's body and that things of the body are not helpful, not desirable. So it was really deeply reassuring and a sense of like coming home. It allowed me to come home into my body, that Reiki is embodied as a practice. It is in your body. I think we've had the most beautiful demo of that this morning with Kathy's session, of the ability to feel and move chi within us, through us, express it out of us. So that was my own experience. And I felt that the Reiki system gave us a way that we can support our minds, our bodies, our energy, and our spiritual development. So in doing that, it allows us to support the whole of our being. And it isn't quite as simple as this part of the system supports our mind, though I do think mindfulness and the precepts support our mind. And I do think that self-healing and the daily energy exercises support our bodies and our energy. But I also think that each element supports all the elements. So each of the 5 aspects of Reiki that I'm going to talk about now support all the aspects of our being. Might have a slight individual focus, but basically all 5 support all elements. But let's see if you agree with me. So what are these 5 elements to the system? They are daily commitments to carry out energy exercises, to perform self-healing, to receive spiritual empowerment regularly, to live the 5 precepts, and to practice mindfulness. So that's what I'm going to go through for you in the remainder of this talk. I'm going to go through each of those aspects in turn. So let's look at the daily exercises. So the one that we will all be most familiar with is the Hatsu-rei technique. This ability to clean our energy prior, often, to working with somebody else with Reiki or to working with ourselves with Reiki. We learn to clear off from the body, quite physically, if you remember, it includes movements like this, clearing off from the body quite physically whatever we might have accumulated. And it's not that we've done anything wrong, and I'd love to just focus on that for a moment. When we are clearing and cleaning our energy, there is no suggestion that we've somehow made an error. It is actually just simply life is busy. We are mixing with other people, with the things that are going on in their life, and we don't have to carry all of that. We don't actually have to carry all of it. We don't realize it that we're carrying other people's stuff often. But the beauty of the Hatsu-rei is it just gives us this opportunity to go, okay, all of that is set aside, and to reconnect with ourselves, and from that centering position to connect with Reiki deliberately, to practice bringing it through into the Tanden, to practice experiencing the Tanden. That was one of my biggest differences for me as somebody who did a Western Reiki path at 1 and 2 and only discovered the original Japanese style at Reiki master level. Was I hadn't received the same focus on the Tanden in my 1 and 2. So the Hatsu-rei really helped me over the years to experience my own sense of power and my own sense of self-prioritization. And I use that deliberately rather than self-care, because I actually think it's an active act of prioritizing yourself first in order that you have what you need to go about your life, to look after your responsibilities, to look after other people, that we'll prioritize ourselves and our well-being and our health, and that the focus on the Tanden really does help you do that. And then in that Hatsu-rei, as you know, we recommit to the 5 precepts, we practice feeling the energy in our hands, and then we go about our daily life, or we go on to our treatment or our self-healing, or however you like to use it. So Hatsu-rei is something I found I've been close to at different times, like really wanted, and at other times I've come away from. And I'm really very curious whether that's been the case for you, that there have been elements of the path that at different times you've needed more. So you've done more of one part of it. Maybe you've done more self-healing at a part where you were very challenged, or more of Hatsu-rei, or more of really focus on the precepts. I'm curious about that because, again, you're not doing anything wrong. I think for me, my experience of Reiki as a self-development path is that Reiki is a conscious life force. And I honestly feel in the end, my biggest teacher has been the Reiki itself, that it leads me by the hand to the next thing that I need to focus on. Learn this bit, get this bit really in you. And then somehow naturally, the next bit suddenly becomes more bright, you know, more attracting of my attention. And I refocus on that for a while. I guess I'm focusing on emphasizing that we haven't done anything wrong, because it's an experience that I have quite often as a teacher of Reiki, is people having a sense they're not getting things right, and that they should be somehow other than they are. And I want to give the message that I don't think that that is true. I think that your journey unfolds in front of you, as long as your intention is there to sort of actively witness that and be an active participant. Your journey unfolds in the way that you are ready for. And there are times we can't be fully ready for something, that later on in life we go, oh, wow, okay, that's why I wasn't ready, because I hadn't yet looked at this aspect of my life. So I encourage you to trust that it is happening as it needs to, that it's unfolding as it needs to. And so long as your intention is there to continue to develop on the path with Reiki, that Reiki will lead you wherever you need to go. When you found a real sense of home in Hatsure, right? When it's no longer at the point where you have to listen to Taggart's recording or you have to have the manual open in front of you and it's just in you, and you begin to get this instinctive knowledge of when it would be helpful to do, then I found for myself, and you might find this true for you, that it was really helpful to expand to other energy exercises as well. So we have some in our Reiki master level, but also through experience like Kathy's just demonstrated today, through Qigong, Tai Chi, through Aikido, through yoga too, ways in which you can move with intention in keeping with the energy, to draw energy up, to express energy through your body, to bring energy into the space around you, to clear energy, to digest experience. To begin to understand we can do this with intention, to me, is really, really important. But it also gives you an even greater experience of the Tanden. And sometimes we use the word Dantian if we're having a more Chinese-based practice, but they mean the same thing. Intention is so important in Reiki, and for me, as we move through the levels of Reiki, intention becomes more and more and more important. And so you can embrace that at whatever level of Reiki you're at. You can embrace living with intention, doing your Reiki with intention, like real clarity. You can be so precise. And I encourage it deeply, because then that allows you to live your whole life with more intention, to come into each aspect of life really considering, what is it that I want to bring here? So daily exercises, Hatsure, but also potentially onwards to other exercises as well. The second element is the self-healing element. And I've occasionally been asked why anyone would get ill ever again after being shown Reiki self-healing. And I've meditated on this one a lot. So I don't know what your view of that is. I think it's really worth considering. But for myself, what I found is, number one, I cannot always see my own patterns. And sometimes those patterns have had to manifest physically in order for me to be able to spot them. And that could be, so it could be physically, or it could be energetic or an emotional expression. So this is why I think treatment with other people remains so useful, even when you've learned to do Reiki for yourself, because other people can see things that are just in your blind spot. And maybe there are things in your blind spot because it challenges how you think about yourself. So I'll give you an example. I always prefer real examples. So for me, my family has basically all suffered from tension headache. And I watched in my parents how they sort of, in their sort of later 30s and into their 40s, what had been tension headache became really serious migraine for both of them. And ongoing, my father's passed away now, but ongoing with my mum, right into her 70s, these regular and debilitating migraine. And when I started having migraine, I mean, literally looking back at it, the exact same, sort of like from age 37 onwards, and they became more frequent. And then in the last 2 years, they became more debilitating. I really did have to take a step back and ask myself, what is this pattern? What is this pattern? And I wouldn't say I'm all the way out of, excuse me, wouldn't say I'm all the way out of that inquiry yet, but I have learned so much from the inquiry about how our family deals with stress and how our family feels about conflict and how I feel about conflict and not necessarily comfortable about conflict. And so I would say, I'm going to just pull a tissue out because I just got my water over, by the way. So 1 second. If I'm looking distracted for a second, that's what I'm doing. I'll just do another one. So I would say that for me, self-healing was something I was doing as these migraines got worse. I was doing self-healing, but I hadn't yet seen the pattern, and it took somebody else to point out to me that stress was at the bottom of it. Because I would have always told you that I wasn't that stressed. I would have just told you I wasn't that stressed. Even when life was full of stressful things, I always felt, but I'm really quite good with stress. So for me, your blind spots, the patterns you haven't seen yet, are one reason why we might still get ill, even though we have the self-healing of Reiki. Other things can be happening, sometimes external factors outside of your control, maybe accidents that you didn't cause that you can see anyway, which you caused, or outside contributions to a situation that take it into something you can no longer control. Sometimes I think internal factors build up and cause illness. And again, for me, just a real life example of that. In my 20s, I had no idea that the stress that I was experiencing at that time, there was definitely a distinct cause of stress for about 5 years, had caused me to develop leaky gut syndrome, which meant that continuing to eat gluten was essentially poisoning me. And I didn't even know what gluten was at that time. And it was only when I went to see a herbalist, and the very first question she asked me was, have you ever thought of going gluten-free? And I had to say, I don't know what gluten is. It was only then that I could unpick bit by bit. Oh my goodness, all these different symptoms are to do with that chronic stress at that time. And that was just a simple nutritional change that my body reacted so amazingly to when I eventually did it. So do you think internal factors can build up? And I want to emphasize again that even if you have been shown self-healing and you go on to experience an illness, not to add to it by self-recrimination. We can learn from our experience, but I don't believe anyway that we learn better when we load judgment on top. And I'm going to be talking more about non-judgment towards the end of this talk. So what do I feel self-healing can do when I've sort of shared the challenge to it? I think it can really prepare your body and your mind, and to clear matters that are brewing but not yet expressed. Sometimes you really can just head things off. I've had clients and students who've been able to head off colds when they spotted it early enough, to head off headaches when they spotted it early enough, to give themselves pain relief when they've had an injury and they're recovering. I definitely think it supports you both emotionally and physically when illness is manifested, and absolutely my own experience, it helps you recover faster. But I do also think there's something in the word healing. It is healing rather than just treating symptoms. And that's a really important distinction for me, because if you think about what healing is, it includes the whole self. So I actually think self-healing gives you spiritual succor as well. That's my view. I would be so interested in your view. So I find self-healing an empowering way also at the end of the day to prevent one day blurring into the next. And I use it all the time to help myself after, events have distressed me in some way. When I remember, because I don't always remember, because that's how it works, which is why I, like I'm sure many of you, have little reminders everywhere. If you could see the bottom of my screen, it's just a set of different reminders for things that I've committed to. Self-healing is one of them, but I have to sometimes put reminders in different places so that I remember I have this. And I'm sure that other people on the call and who'll listen later do recognize that to be true. So the third element then is receiving regular spiritual empowerments. Now, this was a gift of the Japanese approach that I hadn't experienced in my previous Western Reiki world. for me, how I was taught initially, it was sort of a one and done attunement. And I really loved the regular empowerments as an approach, because what it opened up for me, and I hope I can inspire you in this, it opened up a different relationship with Reiki and with my, almost, I want to say, my sense of custodianship of my own Reiki channel, my own connection to Reiki. Like, I can take care of my connection to Reiki. I've met so many people just going about life who said, oh yeah, I trained in that. Like, I did my Reiki 1 or even my Reiki 2 once, but I don't really use it and I don't feel confident I'm still connected. And your regular Reiki empowerments are a way to keep that life, you know, to keep that alive, so that you never have to have the thought, I don't know if I'm still connected. You absolutely are, because you can do something active about it. So at a super practical level, in the Reiki Evolution group you'll find on Facebook, you'll find a post pinned which says who of the teachers are giving out Reiki regularly every day. So I know that Taggart still gives out Reiki on Mondays, Reiki empowerment. So you can just be quiet, sit with the intention of receiving the Reiki empowerment that Taggart has sent out, or one of the other teachers on other days. So we've made it very easy to connect to you. What I have loved about it for myself, and why I really recommend that you find ways that work for you to receive regular empowerments, is I became more sensitive in my Reiki as I received more empowerments. I became more sensitive. I could feel differences in the energy, which made it easier to feel earth and heavenly ki, and different elements at master level. I definitely, the earliest thing I found was it changed how much Reiki I could bring through at any one time. And then actually, as that became quite a physical experience for me, it really emphasized to me that I'm not giving my own energy when I'm giving a treatment or doing a broadcast or whatever. It's coming through me. It was so physical, so tangible. I couldn't mistake it for anything else. It's coming through me rather than from me. But I also really found that my distant healing and my distant empowerment skills improved. I mean, dramatically improved. That people just reported being able to feel more on the other end of a distant connection. It also felt like a confirmation process. So an opportunity to choose again and again to commit to these practices. And so for me, when I was thinking about an example of this, really the example that came to mind was being in love, where, you know, when you're in love with somebody and you're in a relationship with them, you choose again and again to be with that person. It's not a one-off choice, it's a re-choosing day to day. And so through regular empowerment, I guess I found myself choosing again. I choose Reiki again. I choose myself again through having connection to this amazing life force. And I commit to being an active partner in my life by doing so. So that's how it's been for me. And as always, I'd love to know how other people experience it. The fourth element that I'm going to talk about more briefly, because at the first half of our national gathering, my whole talk was on living the precepts, but I will touch on them briefly today for completeness of this talk. So the fourth element is living the precepts. And the first thing I'll do, I guess, is just share that I find the precepts so valuable, because I find that they take all of this guidance out there, all of this spiritual wisdom out there, and boil it down to the bare essentials. But those bare essentials are so comprehensive that if you actually did them, you'd really be living a very balanced, empowered life. I guess that's why they matter to me so much. And it's absolutely the same. You know, I had for the first, I mean, several years, and I do mean probably 3 or 4 years of my Reiki experience, I had the precepts written on a card, kept in my wallet. I had them on a poster on my wall. And the point was, read them so often that they become a part of who you are. And I just don't see anything wrong with needing to give yourself reminders. I think it's super practical. Please just do it. If there's an element of the Reiki system that you consistently forget, make it easier to remember. There may be a reason you consistently forget because you're not ready to engage with it yet, and that's one matter. But if it's just a memory aspect, just make it easier. So, what are the precepts? I'll give them in the translation that I was originally taught. Just for today, I will not be angry. I will not worry. I will be grateful for my many blessings. I will do my work honestly. I will be kind to every living thing. And you may have seen in one of the manuals that there's an aside which speaks about how the word that's been translated as blessings is the same word for Reiju empowerments. So it could potentially be translated as I will be grateful for my many empowerments. Now, either works for me anyway, but I've always loved that. It does emphasize to me the importance of the empowerments. So with the precepts, we've got really explicit direction in how to live our lives. And the more that you choose to practice them, the stronger you get in them. That's so directly how you get strong, how you get confident in those things. The way that I work with it is I go through regular periods of choosing one that I particularly want to work with and just sticking with it until I learn something new, or until I feel like, yeah, I guess that I feel like I've embodied it to another level. There's no end to embodying something, right? It's a path. It just goes on and on, deeper and deeper, more, exploring your inner territory, which is infinite. So don't worry if it's the 10th time you've picked something like I'm working on not being angry again. Don't worry, don't load it with judgment. You don't need to. It's not important how many times. It's only important that you do it. So go with the one that attracts you, or go with the one that you feel, do you know what, I just don't get that. Or go with the one that I think is impossible to do. You know where you need to put your focus. If you're quiet, you know. And the benefit comes in the practice. But for today's talk, because you can listen to the other talk in full on the replay, for today's talk, I want to just pull out just for today, because it leads me into the fifth element, the system, which is about committing to a mindful approach to life. So just for today, or as I do sometimes say it in my head, just even right now in this moment, that's where we live our lives. I do lots and lots of work with ancestry, and in working with ancestors, I sometimes express it as we're the point of the spear. We're right at the tip. We're the ones that are alive right now. And then we have behind us this sort of expanding V shape of all the different ancestors that have been necessary to bring us here. But we're the ones or another way to say it, we're the ones at the coalface. We're the ones here. And I've always felt, I guess, a sense of, maybe obligation's not quite the right word because that has connotations to it, but like a desire to be present for my life. My ancestors can't be present for life right in this moment in the way that I can, because I'm the one that's alive. And so I really want to get the most out of being alive. I want to be here. And that's actually at the very essence of what mindfulness is. Mindfulness can be defined as paying attention deliberately and with kindness to the moment, moment by moment. So it's paying attention, it's deliberate, it's kind to the moment. So what's happening right now, moment by moment. So it's being here, not in the past where so much of our worry, or well, so much of our anger and worry can come from, not in the future where so much of our worry lives, stuff that hasn't happened yet, but here in this moment with our whole self. And I want to just direct you to the word empowerment. It's so important as a part of Reiki because it is about becoming more empowered, more the leader of your own life, taking back your agency, right? Not letting life happen to you as if you're just sort of flotsam, but actually directing the boat, setting your intention. We all have to roll with what happens from time to time, but we can right ourselves. We can take hold again. We can reset our intention. We can be the actor of our own life. We can be in charge, not 100% in charge is the right words, but we can have the sense of I'm here, I'm present, I'm responding to what's happening right now. And in mindfulness, so important is the way in which you're paying attention. So you'll hear of the attitudes that you're invited to bring in mindfulness. And there are various numbers of attitudes, and I don't want you to get lost in that. Some people say there's 3, some people say there's 7, some people say there's 9. I'm just going to give you the ones that I have worked with personally. And any one of these would give you so much material to work with in yourself on your self-development path. So the first, kindness, to me, that's a sort of a real, like a wrapper around the whole set. Kindness. And it's a beautiful thing to include yourself in your kindness. Many, many, many of us instinctively show kindness to others far more than to ourselves. And a profound part of Reiki on my path has been revealing at greater levels as I've gone on over 18 years, little pockets of unkindness that I didn't even know I had. Little pockets of judgment, little pockets of guilt or frustration, or somehow just wishing I was other than I am. And Reiki takes me by the hand and shows me. And then I have a choice. Do I wish to continue to treat myself like that? Do I wish to continue to speak to myself like that? Because mine is the voice that I hear the most. So mine is the voice that matters most to myself. Yours is the voice that matters most to you. So kindness is the wrapper for me for the whole thing. But within that, we're talking about compassion. And loving kindness meditation is the most exquisite way to build up your ability to feel compassion for other beings. Because we do sometimes have a tendency to find it easy to be compassionate to people we like, or even perhaps to people we feel neutral about. But the beauty of a loving kindness meditation is it gives you a safe environment and a safe way in which to practice showing compassion for people you don't like, or perhaps you're in active conflict with. So compassion is so valuable. Curiosity. Now, I'm a coach, so I'm always going to love curiosity because it's one of the key things we bring to coaching is a lack of assumptions about why somebody does something or why we've done something, and instead a curiosity to learn. I'm curious why this has affected me in this way. I'm curious why I chose to say that when I knew it would trigger that person in that way, it would push that button. I'm curious what motivated them in that circumstance. Curiosity is a beautiful way to detach judgment, to detach assumptions and expectations, just to be in the moment, curious. Let's see what happens. And the next one is non-judgment. So there's so much room for development in practicing non-judgment, because judging, just going to be really clear where I stand, judgment is normal, natural, we do it all the time. It's part of how, from a sort of evolutionary psychology perspective, it's part of how we work out where we are in the system that we're in the tribe that we're in, where are we, and how do we need to behave accordingly. So judgment is just a natural human function. I like to think, therefore, as non-judgment being able to detach from judgment, being willing to practice, what's the right way to say it? Being willing to practice letting go of judgment when it has occurred. Being willing to include yourself in that non-judgment. Being willing to include others. Looking actively for ways in which to include yourself and others. But also, I often use the word discernment. That really what we're learning to do is discern what's helpful, not helpful, what's constructive, what's not constructive, what will be useful in that moment of time. Then we have non-attachment. You could give a whole talk on that, couldn't you? Non-attachment. I would just boil it down for you to say, non-attachment doesn't mean you don't care. It just means, in fact, sometimes it means you care more because you don't attach how something should happen, how somebody should love you, how somebody should be at work, how somebody should support you in this way. Sometimes it's a greater expression. Allow your child to be the person that they are. Allow your parent to be the person that they are. Patience, trust, acceptance. You can see how learning to take a mindful approach to life and actually perhaps investigating mindfulness more can add another aspect to the self-development part of Reiki. It adds a deliberate choice to refine how you approach life. It allows, for me, more than anything else, it allows space so that I can see, X has happened, and whether that's internally, so it's like a thought I've had or a scenario I've played out, or externally, something's actually happening. I can see what my instinctive reaction to that is. And then I have this space, and the more I practice, the more the space gets, where I get an opportunity to choose what my response is going to be, right? So I'm not a slave to my reactions, which is how it completes the full circle back to the precepts. I don't have to worry. I don't have to be angry. I don't have to be sad, or at least I don't have to be dominated by those things. I may still have the emotion, but I certainly don't need to be dominated by them. So these are the 5 aspects of the Reiki system, these ways that we have to navigate life and to grow ourselves and to experience more serenity, brushing off that which is not ours to deal with. Not all the troubles of the world are ours to deal with. And even though we may be empathic and feel so deeply, as I do, other people's pain and the pain of the world, yet I can still let that go in the moment and recenter myself in what's actually happening for me right now, from which I can make a better choice about what I'm going to do for other people, what I'm going to do for the world at large, what I'm going to do for me personally, rather than being driven by the empathy. So the final thing I want to say is, through the practice of mindfulness, I find that we can be more available to enjoy and experience our life. And when that life includes partnership with life force energy, self-healing, the ability to clean our energy, to direct it at will, who wouldn't want that? Who wouldn't want to become a partner with life and co-creator of your own life. So thank you so much for your kind attention. I'm so appreciative. That's me for today.